Good morning, students. So I'm posting my second tip for you that should help you with shading and a few techniques. Now, I do want to warn you, my cat is on the table as well. So if Remy comes to say hello, I will definitely have to stop. So here's the resources that are like the top in my class for shading. You have your eraser, your blending tools, which these are the inexpensive ones. Some of you might have the blending stump, which is wonderful too. And then the prized B pencil, 6B is really good for shading. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that I've noticed in your drawings that will be helpful. So here I have two pieces of paper. So this I actually teach on the first day of my classes. So if I end up teaching you at Holy Trinity, I would be so blessed because I will be teaching this again. You'll already be ahead of the game. So this is just a regular piece of computer paper, and I'm going to take another piece of paper. I'm just going to fold it in half. Okay. And I'm going to just rip it in half for now. It's fairly quiet in my house still because my kids are still sleeping. So hopefully nobody comes and interrupts the video. So you're just going to take a smaller piece of scrap paper. You can just use another computer paper. So I'm going to show you something that you used for your border, which is called the sharp edge technique. It's the most commonly used shading technique for students anywhere, especially in art school. So I'm just going to make a little sphere, and I'm going to make also a little square. So just so you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to move this paper. And just like when you guys have your border, you're just going to, you see how I told you this before, you never shade this way, you kind of make the pencil as flat as you can. You're just going to apply some graphite. And I'm going to start by making actually a square or a rectangle. It really doesn't matter. I'm just trying to show you how to do the shading. And my cat's making a racket, you can hear it. So I'm just going to make a little square here. I'm going to use the cotton swab here. And one of the things you guys did as well when you would make your one inch border is fade outwards. So you always kind of want to push harder where the line is and then kind of ease the pressure. That way it kind of creates that ombre effect that you want. And I also don't necessarily go this way because when you get streaking, I just use circles. And all I'm going to do, see how I use the circles? Because some of you might have noticed maybe on your border that you had like little streaks and then you had to go back with your cotton ball and kind of blend in circles to get rid of those lines. So if you move that paper, now you have that beautiful sharp edge. So I'm just going to quickly do that. And hope you guys survived the big storm yesterday. We had lots of trees fall on our street. It was kind of scary for a moment, but God willing, everybody was safe. So it didn't spoil our Canada Day celebrations. Our kids still went and celebrated at the park here just to watch the fireworks. And today is my son's birthday, so I was, instead of going to the fireworks, which I really don't enjoy as much because of my past, it reminds me too much of the war I went through as a kid, I made cupcakes for my son instead. So you can kind of see what I'm doing here. It doesn't really matter, it's just practice. If you kind of want to do this, just to make that shape, you could get this beautiful sharp edge. So one thing you can use this technique for, apart from making borders, is to use it for any kind of shading that has flat surfaces, such as metal, sometimes wood, definitely your borders, roads. If you did like a perspective drawing and you just want to kind of add a finishing touch of like a slight shading on the lines of the buildings, you can usually just use a piece of paper. So one of the things that I noticed when you did your grayscales is that there would be smudges on the outer edges. So I always tell my students, take a clean part of your paper, you're going to cover your work to preserve its integrity. You can kind of see, I can see the smudges there, right? So you take your eraser and you're just going to erase anything that's outside that square. Now, some artists, to get rid of pencil shavings, just use a brush, like a paintbrush that they have laying around, but for now I'll just use my hands. And when you do that, you get that beautiful sharp edge, and that's what I want, especially on your borders. You always want your border to start looking sharp. And I'm gonna do this area as well because I can see a little bit of a smudge here, and that will help you kind of sharpen up any edges that you have. You always kind of preserve the integrity of your work. This side's actually looking pretty good, so I'm not gonna do any erasing on the other edge. And there's our kind of like ombre sharp edge shading shape. And the edges are nice and crisp. And I noticed some of you, when you did your sphere, when you were shading your sphere, you can do the same thing to kind of like shade around it. So I'll show you kind of what I mean. So I'm gonna just take my cup here. And some of you didn't have a printer, so you maybe had to do what I'm doing right now, because I don't really have a compass here at home. I just kind of want to show you that this principle of shading can apply also to things that are circular. So like when you had your sphere, you did your beautiful blending inside, you erased it, you added your highlights, and then you notice, some of you missed this, but there was a shadow around the sphere. So you could cut this paper in a circle, especially if you have the same shape. You can like lay the cup on top again and cut it, or you can just keep moving the paper and allow yourself to add the shading around it. So you can kind of see I got a little bit of it, but I don't want these lines, so I'm just going to line up to the next section like that. See how it's kind of forming this beautiful shadow. And even though the object is not square, you can still apply the same technique. So if I went all the way around now, it would be exactly the same. And anytime you get lines like this, if you just take your paper and angle it and then blend again, you will get rid of those lines. And a lot of times your cotton ball will already have graphite on it, and it's exactly how much you need. So you don't even need to reapply it. Just kind of in circles, softly blend, and you'll get that shadow. So this technique is quite useful. We use it in art class all the time. So next thing I want to teach you is, if you're not doing a flat or metallic surface, how do you create a texture using this same technique that's most suitable for example, clouds, water ripples, road that's crackled, wood, especially pieces of ripped paper. So it's kind of you could say a paradox when you're going to use a piece of paper to draw a piece of paper. This was one of my favorite art techniques in art school. So you can kind of see this one is jaggedy, but I'm going to rip it a little bit more. So I'm just going to rip a little piece of paper. Okay, I'm going to use either one, doesn't really matter, but you can kind of see I made sure my edge was quite jaggedy, and I'm going to do the exact same technique, except this time we're going to create a ripple effect. So I had a student who was doing clouds, for example, and he ended up using this technique, and the clouds look beautiful. And you might notice that the water, or the condensation of the water, accumulates on the bottom of the cloud. So obviously you want the darker parts on the cloud to be on the bottom. And you can kind of see, if this was like, sorry, our cat's not happy right now. You can kind of see, like, if this was like a mountain, you could also do that for creating what we call atmospheric perspective, which is when the objects are further away from you, they recede or they get lighter. So if these were like mountains you were layering, you would make sure your shading got lighter and lighter and fadier and fade it all the way. So I'm gonna flip this paper over so it's fresh, so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So now we're gonna use the sharp edge technique to create a little crackled edge. And it's the same thing we were doing. The only difference now is that our paper, instead of being straight, is jaggedy. And when I move this is like the most satisfying thing because it looks so beautiful. You see the little crackled edge? So let's say this was a mountain or a part of a cloud or part of a ripple in the water. You could like keep moving that paper and would create that ripple effect. So I strongly encourage you to kind of play with this technique. What I usually have my students do is we create a piece of paper using a piece of paper. So I'm going to make a little piece of paper just to show you, just kind of how I made the square. I'm going to make a white piece of paper with a little rip in the middle. So I have to rotate this again, and you can put it kind of wherever you like. Just for this exercise, I'm just kind of making a little piece of paper. But if you want to, like if you have time and you find this very satisfying and interesting, you can make like a big piece of paper. So you can kind of see the piece of paper forming. So I had two ways I could have done this. I could have made the background white and the paper dark, or I could have made the paper white with a dark background, and that's what I chose to do. And if you don't like the rips you have, you can always just rip another little piece of paper and make them like more jaggedy. Obviously, it's going to look more crackled, or the texture will be more pronounced. So I'm going to use that for the last part of the edge. And yes, your hands will get messy, but it's art. Just have fun, enjoy it, okay? So you can kind of see, you see how maybe this was like, even like when I look at this, I don't just see a piece of paper. I see like clouds and, you know, let's say if the sun was coming through, you could use like the sharp edge technique to create a couple of rays of sun coming through the clouds. So let's say this was my paper and I was happy with this. To make it more realistic, I could create another little rip inside the piece of paper. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to make a little rip just in the center here. So you're just going to shade like this. And then in order for that little rip to show, you're going to rotate your paper like a mirror, right? And you have to cover some of the work that you've done in order to leave this little white space. So I'm going to just move it forward just a little bit. And create, you can see like a little rip. And I'm going to create the other side as well. There we go. So now it's like a little rip, you could say. My son's been watching Star Wars, so it's like, I think, a rip, you know, in the universe. So you can kind of see the technique. So just to recap, for our morning technique, the sharp edge technique, super useful. That's how you make your border, shade anything that's flat, add beautiful shadows. You could like shade, let's say you drew a bowl on a table, but you want the shadow, which usually that's the way it looks perfectly smooth. There's no pencil lines. So you always use the sharp edge technique to create that. And you can just, you know, use a new piece of paper. Obviously, the darker, higher the B, the darker this is going to be without you having to layer over and over again. And one of the things that I've noticed as well is like some of you, when you blend it, I'm just going to kind of not do the best shading just to show you. Let's say you have just like, let's say this was a square and you were shading, but you didn't really kind of cross hatch it or shade in opposite directions or get rid of the lines in between. And then you went and took your blending and went in circles or however you did it. And you might have noticed that you see all these lines, even though you made an effort to blend it, the lines reveal themselves underneath and it wasn't smooth. And maybe you found that very frustrating. So one of the things I always tell my students is when you're going to shade, so now I'm going to do it so there's no lines in between. And to make sure that it's solid before you blend, there's no white spaces, you're going to cross hatch or shade in the opposite direction. Again, my pencil as flat as I can make it so I don't get any lines. And I can even maybe shade in the third direction as well. So now, instead of having lines, you have an entire area filled. So now when you take your blending tool, and I always like to do it in circles, you are going to get a much better effect of smooth value blending than like this. So just a little other tip. And then just to wrap up our video, you use the same sharp edge technique, except your paper is now ripped, and you can rip it however you like, and you can use this for any types of textures that require this kind of look. So that's my little tip for you. I hope I see some of these techniques in your future drawings. Maybe something like this, if you have, you know, a lake or a sky or some kind of wood texture in your drawing. I do want to applaud you for the work you're doing. I know it's very hard because I'm not physically with you, but I'm going to do my best to post these little videos and tips and to help you. And you can always email me with any questions you have. If you're absolutely stuck and you still need me to physically show you something, I can always meet you through Teams, and I can show you, and you can kind of show me your artwork and we can have a conversation. So I hope you're having a lovely summer and enjoying this course, and we will talk soon. Bye.